the only session between you and lunch. Always the best spot of the day. So I appreciate you hanging in there. But there's a great number of things going on over the lunch hour as well as in the afternoon, so much more to come. Thank you so much for putting this event together, to the Digital Citizenship Summit team, to Namely, to Twitter, and to all the volunteers who have still remained nameless, but I know there were many of you who put a lot of hours into making today possible. My name is Lynette Owens. I work for Trend Micro, and I've been doing work around digital citizenship since 2008. And I want to talk a little bit about why on earth are we talking about this topic at a Digital Citizenship Summit. And it actually sort of popped up in a few of the panels and discussions earlier today, but we want to make it very, very clear what is the connection between media literacy education and digital citizenship. A little bit about the genesis of why we brought this topic today. Number one, as we have, those of us in the digital citizenship space have discovered in our own work, if you go into a school system and try to find the home of the digital citizenship department or staff or curriculum, do you find anything? No, you don't find that. That doesn't exist. It's quite a challenge to find that at a mass scale around this country. I think you will find some very progressive school districts around this country who are doing that, and even around the world, but it is not common. And in my personal discovery in this work, what I realized was there was something already in place. There was a community of educators and a discipline and an area of expertise already in place called media literacy. And if anything, if you remember anything from this panel at the end of today, you go back to where you've come from and you find those educators, because they are sitting somewhere in those school districts. They're lonely, they're doing important work, and they are underfunded and unsupported, but the topic of digital citizenship, for some reason, is getting all the attention today. And our goal as a panel is to enlighten you first on what the definition of media literacy is and why the connection is so important. The second reason is that when we think about these issues playing out with youth online, you really cannot separate the impact that popular culture driven by the media has on the way things play out among us online. Many apps became popular because some celebrity took hold of it. Reality TV and the correlation of the selfie and the me and what is it, the I generation, I don't know what we're calling it now. That's not a coincidence, I don't think. So we have to have this conversation about why media literacy is so important to the digital citizenship conversation. So with that as the backdrop, I want to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, your name and a little bit about your role and your participation on this panel.
I'm Sister Nancy Usselman. I'm from the director of the Pauling Center for Media Studies in Los Angeles. We work from that center to have a faith-based perspective on media literacy, so we call it media mindfulness. So we encourage and develop media mindfulness in both culture, education, and in faith formation. And I've been teaching media literacy for about 20 years, and I find it such an invaluable and important part of education, and also in teaching the teachers on how to teach that to kids and teenagers especially. I take it from a perspective of virtue ethics, helping people to come to a greater understanding of the human person, but of the dignity of each human being, and also how that helps us to make better decisions and ethical decisions within our digital universe. So I really emphasize that aspect of ethics within media literacy, which is kind of different than other media literacy educators. But that's how we make that present within our culture, within popular culture, and within all areas of faith, and understanding that faith and media do connect. do have a relationship, so.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Whitney. I am the Chief Product and Partnerships Officer of iCivics. iCivics is an organization, a nonprofit organization that was founded by Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor to try to teach civics to kids in schools across the country. It has been wildly successful, way beyond what she anticipated it would do. We teach through digital games, really engaging forms of media. We have 19 games, and we are used in 50% of middle school civics classrooms across the country and 24% of civics high school classrooms across the country. One of the most depressing things about civics is that it is not required in every state right now, and it is sort of a marginalized part of the curriculum in the same way that media literacy is sometimes, but it is an absolutely critical and imperative part of it. I could conjure up different things about this election too to sort of paint a picture, but I think you all know what we're talking about. It's been a tough year for people understanding media messages, making sense of them, understanding how to dissect them, and those are all media literacy practices that fall within the civic education sphere. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I also am on the governing board of the National Association for Media Literacy Education.
I'm Nancy Watson. I'm a former librarian and a current instructional technology specialist in Plano ISD, which is a suburb of Dallas, Texas. I have a fascination with not just media literacy, but all kinds of digital literacy. So that includes media literacy, information literacy, visual literacy, and how all of those things kind of play in together. And I would agree with Lynette that one of the things that is kind of problematic about the digital citizenship conversation is there is not somebody that just wants to leap up there and take charge of that. My mantra is that every teacher, every classroom, every day should be having these conversations. I think that's true with media literacy and digital literacy as well as digital citizenship. So I'm hoping that there's somebody in every school district and in every school that is kind of incessantly banging that drum for awareness about digital citizenship, and I try very hard to be that person in my district.
Hi there, I'm Tessa Jolls. I'm president of the Center for Media Literacy in Los Angeles. And our organization was founded many years ago in the 1980s by Elizabeth Tillman. And it started with the publication of a magazine called Media and Values. And so we've continued our work in the media literacy field, and definitely we see digital citizenship as really an important application of media literacy. We see media literacy as a great foundation for addressing any subject, anywhere, anytime. So we've developed an evidence-based framework for media literacy that can be applied to any subject. And we continue to do a lot of work in developing curriculum and providing training and definitely continuing to advocate. So I really like the six-word biography because I thought about mine and I thought it would be advocating for media literacy and change.
I'm Erin McNeill. I'm the founder and president of Media Literacy Now. And when I got this initiative started about 5 years ago, I was writing about media literacy, and I realized that there is this huge topic that nobody at the public policy level was really talking about. We had all these other issues we were talking about in the country, and not about the fact that kids were spending 10 or 15 hours a day with all kinds of media, whether digital or otherwise, and nobody's talking to them about that, and nobody at the public policy level is addressing this issue. So we got a bill introduced in Massachusetts. Soon after that, the next person I heard from was Claire Beach about doing the same thing in Washington. So it didn't pass right away in Massachusetts, and we introduced again, and I said, what's taking so long? So we launched more of a national effort to get media literacy being discussed at the public policy level, so state by state, introducing bills. This year we got 2 bills passed, Washington State and also one in Connecticut on social media, requiring social media education in middle school. are working with about 17 other states right now on advocating for media literacy at the state legislature level. And we are also now, as you heard, working with Common Sense Kids Action with creating this model bill that we're rolling out this fall and into the spring.
Welcome to all of you. Thank you. I think it would behoove us to have a baseline from which we're all working from. And so, Tessa, I want to direct this question to you, but I'll also ask the rest of the panel to comment. And please answer the question, what is media literacy and what does it mean to be media literate?
Well, of course, that's a definition that continues to evolve. But a long-standing definition was developed with the Aspen Institute at a meeting of the Aspen Institute by media literacy leaders. And it was the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in all its forms. Now, with the advancement of social media, we've added in the whole idea of participate, because definitely there's that interaction now that was never possible before. So it's very important for us to be addressing the new media.
Others want to comment?
I also just want to emphasize that it's about developing critical thinking skills, especially among the young, to help them to understand who they are within this digital context and how they can then receive the messages, but also create those messages that are a positive change and can be a positive change for others.
One thing we say is media literacy is literacy in the 21st century. And I think a lot of people have said that you need literacy for citizenship. And so there is a very direct link between media literacy and digital citizenship.
Yeah, yesterday at the EduCause Summit, one of the keynote speakers said that wouldn't it be great if we had curriculums built around questions instead of facts? Mm-hmm. And critical thinking is one of the main drivers of all, I agree completely, of all media literacy. It's about understanding, and a framework we use in civic education is knowledge, skills, and engagement. And so having the knowledge of how media works and how different systems work and how you can create media, that's one piece of it. But having those skills to think about, to make cogent arguments, to dissect messages that are coming to you, those are all really important as well. And then there's that engagement piece, like how do we get out there and change the world around us? And that's one of the questions that kids really do have. How can I make the world a better place? How can I improve it? And I think our young speakers today in particular have been so wonderful at highlighting the opportunity, the promise of media. And I just got a great advice from Liv that if I run out of what to say, I should just go blah, 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 blah. So thank you.
I would just like to jump in, and I think it is great to talk about the creation and the evaluation. But one thing I really haven't heard as part of this conversation is digital equity and what the equity conversation needs to be to allow students of all backgrounds to be able to fully participate in the digital world and in creating media messages and what that means for their consumption of media messages. And it really is kind of a civil rights issue at this point. And I just want to throw that out there as something that you said made me think of that.
Definitely. Fantastic. Yes. I think, thank you for giving clarity to what the definition is, but I think it would also be interesting to talk about what media literacy is not. So Tessa, I don't know if you want to comment.
Well, media literacy, we always cover what media literacy is not, because there's so much confusion about what media literacy is, and sometimes it's easier to identify what it is by saying what it's not. And so, for example, the critical thinking element is absolutely central to media literacy, whether you're producing or consuming media and participating with it. So what media literacy is not then, it's not media bashing. It's not just teaching with media, it's teaching about media, and I think that's a very important distinction. It also involves technology, but it's not synonymous with technology. And so we like to say that it's about the critical thinking with using technology. It's not about pressing the buttons. It's about thinking about what you're saying and what you're doing and the impact that that has. So definitely, there are some lines there that are important to note. And we also encourage people to think of media literacy as a movement, because it certainly is a global movement. It's also a field where there's an evidence base, there's a lot of research around media literacy and programs, and finally, it's a pedagogy. And so it's a way of teaching and learning that has definitely been tested, it's out there, it's reliable, and it's something that can be done in the classroom.
Okay, great. So I think it would be beneficial if we then connected, this ideal of what a media literate student or citizen looks like. What does it mean to be a media literate student? What do they do or not do?
I think so much of it is about helping children and teens to look at how they can grow as human beings, growing in their, recognizing their own human dignity, but also the dignity of others. Because if you're growing in recognizing that gift in other people, that the gift that they are, then you will also be a critically aware of all the messages that come through the media, but also what you produce and what you say, especially through social media and digital media. And I think that's kind of a key pedagogy for both digital citizenship and media literacy, is that respect of the human person so that you can make ethically good decisions in your social media, in your digital web.
I think a media literate person is someone who's not afraid of opposing viewpoints. I think we get so caught up in our own echo chamber, especially I see that in Facebook, and you like something so you get more of the same, and then you get filled with more moral outrage with anything that is in opposition to that, to what you believe. So I think a truly media literate person would be one who is able to see all sides of an argument and come to a conclusion without being threatened by opposing viewpoints.
I think one of the things that media literacy education brings to kids is it helps them to understand the media systems, what's going on behind the message. So how did this message get here and why? And having that understanding really helps kids to, or everybody, to come to understand that they can actually take some action in that situation. They don't have to just accept these messages. When you see where they're coming from, you can advocate for better media, and that again I think is an important link between media literacy and digital citizenship. When you can understand that these messages are produced in a system that we can participate in, I think that's an important part of being a media literate person.
Yeah, I'll go a step further and say that media literate kids are the cool kids. They're the ones who we saw today. That we saw some of the coolest kids I've seen in a while today. They're not suckers. They're gonna look at that. They're gonna see what it is. They're gonna try to dissect it. They're gonna look at it in a way that's critical and thoughtful. If they get something, it's not the person who's just getting some email, something on their Facebook wall, for example, and just reposting it blindly without checking it, without thinking about it. It's somebody who's very thoughtful, and I loved having some really cool kids here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone disagrees that we have some cool kids here today. But I see a really direct connection between, even trying to teach someone not to click on something, because that's going to lead to something bad. Think critically. Be skeptical in a healthy way before you take an action. Whether it's a response to the post of a friend or a link or an email that it's obviously true because it's an email. Sister, did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think one of the areas is talking about that THINK acronym. That is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? I think that's a key area of helping kids to be media literate, but also to be ethical in their media use. And I think that's where it's bringing that whole sense of citizenship to play, is that are we responsible and how to be responsible?
So there are people here who are representing the media, social media, television media, other kinds of media. They're watching us too. What do you want from them? What do you think that they could be doing to support media literacy education as producers of the media?
Well, I think, again, when we think about that interaction, there's a lot more feedback to producers than there used to be. Producers used to, in a sense, have a power that they have to share with the audience now in a much more profound way. And so that's changing the whole media landscape. But at the same time, when you look at the media industry, there's a lot of consolidation. We know that there have been some big mergers and acquisitions lately. The nature of the business is changing, where technology companies are becoming media companies. And so we really need to look at that from a critical standpoint to understand our relationship with media. Because we have an individual relationship with media, we have a relationship with the media producers and companies, and certainly our data, our faces, they're all being monetized. We need to really look at that and be aware of that. We need to know what our rights are, and we need to think about the ownership of our own data and our own persons that are being represented in the media and that are being monetized in the media. So the relationship has changed dramatically. And I think that's fundamental to really examining our relationship with producers and their relationship with us.
I think another aspect is the fact that the media producers and lots of other industries recognize that they want media literate people coming to work for them. And so they can help us by ensuring that media literacy and digital citizenship is considered an absolutely essential part of education today. It's not an add-on, it's not something that we do when we have a little extra time or money. It's a critical part of education, and that can be their role to ensure that it's actually an accepted part of education.
And I'd just like to piggyback off of that. We've been trying to advance a mindset of digital citizenship, digital literacy, media literacy, rather than it being, something, here's one more thing that you have to do as a teacher. It really needs to be a mindset and something that is woven into what teachers are doing on a daily basis. And as far as what we should expect from the media is, report or maybe even acknowledge your own biases when you're doing some reporting.
Yeah, to build on that, trust in the media is at its all-time low right now. The media used to be responsible for transmitting everything and helping us dissect it in terms of politics in particular. And the Gallup report last year in 2015 showed that trusting media was only at 40%, and I would imagine it has eroded significantly this year. There's a concern among everybody. Are my questions being represented? Are things being dissected in the way that they need to be? And now that so many more people are producers of media through our own blogs and our own social media, there's a real sense that are we asking the right questions? Are we being tough enough? And so I think if you are a media company, and I've worked for a number of them, if you're at a media company and you are not involved in a media literacy education curriculum right now, you're missing a huge opportunity, huge. So I would definitely encourage you to get involved with organizations like Namely or some of the other ones that are represented up here.
Nancy, I want to press a little bit about your experience within your school systems. You're living this today. What has been the biggest barrier for you in Plano ISD to make this more widely adopted and integrated into the curriculum?
I would say the number one thing would be time. Teachers are so pressed to get so much covered in a finite period of time. When you talk to them about covering additional concepts, it is a really, really hard sell because they're going to see that as, great, here's one more thing that I have to do when I already didn't have enough time for what I was supposed to get done, 2 weeks ago. And I have a lot of empathy for teachers because it is a hard thing. I think it is the most exciting time to be in education right now. Somebody earlier said that. I absolutely could not agree more, and I also think it's extremely challenging because you have to really change your entire mindset about how you're delivering things, and to throw in that one sentence about we're going to compose a tweet, and if we say it this way, somebody might read that in the wrong tone of voice. But so I think we should probably say it this way instead. That does take some really deep thought on the part of teachers, and I do think it's a fairly small percentage of teachers who can do that very well.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that, while there are some places that do have a standalone media literacy curriculum, it is really viewed at this point as a cross-curriculum subject that can be integrated into any classroom at any grade. Even in a math class, you can look at what is the reality behind these statistics. What are these numbers saying in this news article? And the one thing we know kids want is they don't want exercises. They want to see real-world examples, and this is like an area where you can really integrate it into your classroom and into your curriculum. There's lots of great tools out there, and lots of great creators of curriculum, so we're happy to talk to you about more of that.
Yes, and there are definitely institutional barriers to teaching media literacy in schools. So for example, it's not required for a teacher to get a license to teach. And media literacy is not part of the qualifications that are being called for teachers. Also, we had a panelist earlier from an education department. Most education departments, I can only think of a couple of exceptions, in universities and colleges have no classes on media literacy. And yet media literacy is really foundational for teaching a process of inquiry and really launching students on being lifelong skeptics.
So I want to move to a practical application. I think we all agree, and hopefully I speak on behalf of everybody here in the room and maybe online as well, it's important. We need to do this. We need to connect it with all of the efforts around digital citizenship education as well. So what are some ways, if we want to be the digital change and we want to make a movement happen and we go back to where we came from after today, what are some ways that we can actually make that happen in the places where we live and work?
Well, obviously, you can help to support the legislation that we're working on. I think there are a lot of ways that this needs to happen, and so the one that we're taking is starting sort of a top-down effort from the legislative level. So the policymakers are elevating media literacy and digital citizenship as a priority in schools. So that's one thing you can do, is you can support the legislation. And I think we have a real opportunity here because we came to see maybe a year or so ago, we had been as a movement focusing on media literacy as very important in our schools. And I think maybe a year or so ago, we started to recognize, or I personally started to recognize, that digital citizenship is not just a part of media literacy, but really a very integrated piece of the whole. And so that's why we started to put these together in the legislative effort. And in fact, it was a bill that passed in Utah before Washington that focused on digital citizenship and getting people in the community to start to talk about this. So it called on the state to put together an advisory committee, or districts to put together a committee of people who are educators and researchers and teachers and parents to start figuring this out. And they talked about digital citizenship. And so then when Action for Media Education was ready to get started in Washington, they took that bill and showed it to their senator, who recognized that digital citizenship really has this resonance that we've been lacking so far in the media literacy movement. So among policymakers, they really captured this idea and wanted to run with it. So putting those two things together give us a great opportunity, because media literacy, like Tessa was saying, has this long history of research and pedagogy and curriculum that's all there. and put that together with digital citizenship, which people see as definitely a game changer when you can, anyone at any moment could broadcast something to the entire world. That is a huge game changer, and that makes people pay attention. So we can really take some real steps. And we are running an opportunity. Right now we are about to roll out this bill in various states, but all of you can help. Claire did it just by going to her senator. Any individual person, this is citizenship. Go to your policymakers, your lawmakers, and talk to them about this. And to your superintendent of schools, and tell them you want to do this. Any single person here can talk to their lawmaker, go to in their state, and get this introduced.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that because there's another awesome opportunity right now, which is that the Every Student Succeeds Act is the new legislation that has replaced No Child Left Behind. And it emphasizes the need for well-rounded students that know a lot of different things. And so what that means is that part of that legislation is going to be giving new pools of money to states that can then distribute the money to the schools in their area and their districts. They're planning that legislation right now. The appropriations haven't been finalized yet, but they're going to happen in early 2017. And so if you are interested in media literacy curriculum, this is the time to tell your principals, your teachers, to bring it up in your communities. If you know grants administrators or district administrators, this is the time to advocate for it. The great thing about people in this room is I know you know how to advocate, and I know you're civically minded. You wouldn't be here at this kind of an event if you weren't. So this is really a great example of a time that civic engagement can really take you very far.
I just would like to piggyback off of something that Sarah Thomas said earlier. We have this huge educator community on Twitter, and a small percentage of them are in this digital citizenship conversation. If each one of us could take one more person along on that journey and on that conversation, we would really make some exponential gains in terms of what is happening in the classrooms and happening for our students. If everybody would make an effort to maybe say one more thing a day about digital citizenship or media literacy, that could be a really powerful impact on our education.
I think so much of the engagement I enter into with people as teachers and parents is the negative response to media, social media, and the fear. And I think it's each of us being able to be that difference to help bring that positive change, to bring a positive view of media, which is what we do from the Pauling Center for Media Studies, is to make it a positive experience. That it's not all bad, and that we can be critical engagers while also finding truth, beauty, and goodness present within it. And I think that's what we have to encourage a mindfulness. Ask the questions of the teachers and the parents to say, talk to your kids, ask the questions, be engaged, and be mindful to help them to reflect, to help them to think, help them to be responsible. And that's the key about media literacy and digital citizenship.
And I'd like to add, join meanly. It's free. There's an advocacy group. Also, I'll add that UNESCO has been behind media literacy for many years, and we recently have formed a subchapter for media and information literacy with UNESCO that we're banding together with Canada on. And so again, there are ways to advocate, there are ways to really join in as a community and make the change that we want to see.
Right. One last question, then we'll turn it over to the audience for their questions. When I think about other kinds of literacy that my children are being taught, I think about reading, for example. I know what the summer slide is. I know as a parent that when they're not in the classrooms, I have a role to support their literacy, and that is to make sure they keep on reading. So my question is that when we're trying to teach kids really lifelong important skills, this is not just the responsibility of the schools. What can parents do to support their children's media literacy?
I think it is so easy for parents to hand their kids a device And I see this so often because the kids are so well behaved when they're on their device. So I would encourage parents to have any conversation. The parents that we have heard from today, I really feel like are probably the exception in terms of having those real honest conversations with their students. So that would be one thing that I would say is join a conversation with your kids about what they're doing and know what they're doing online and try to learn from their kids. We've heard what great teachers kids can be, and I would really like to see more parents learning and being initiators of those conversations.
I think so much of it is as parents to know the apps, be out there and know what's out there, know what Snapchat is and how it works. Everybody's using it, all the teens are using it, so do you know what it is? And I think it's helping them to become more technologically advanced, while also just understanding. You don't have to have it perfect, down pat, know every little inside out about every technology, but you just have to know what's out there. And I think that's important especially for parents.
Sister, thank you for that, because actually you're probably much more proficient with Snapchat than I am. So she has Snapchat, she has Instagram, follow her.
We know what we'll be doing at lunch.
Well, I have two pieces of advice for parents. I think, first of all, it's important to remember that the devices are our servants. We're not the servant of our devices. We're in charge of the devices, and we need to make them work for us as a tool. And so I think that's a really important lesson for really all of us. And then the other thing I've thought with parenting, and I have some experience with that, is that parents not only need to have the conversation, but it's important to own their own values. You can't control if your child is going to go down the street, play with a friend, and watch a video game that is well beyond their capacity, in my opinion, to process. But at the same time, you can say to your child, I'm not going to buy that video game for you because it's labeled mature. I don't think you're ready for it. And here's why, and have the discussion so that at least they know where you're coming from and why, and the fact that there's a values base behind your decision. And then, certainly, again, you can't always enforce it, but by the same token, your child knows where you're coming from and why, and your hope is that at some point they'll self-select.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I just want to add, I don't want to be a wet blanket here. I have a 7-year-old, and we talk a lot about the promises of technology too, how it helps us stay in touch. We do FaceTime. We did FaceTime last night. I live in Washington, D.C., right? So there are a lot of ways that it keeps us connected. We can stay in touch with family members better. We talk about apps and what might, why do you think this app costs money and this one doesn't? Why do you think that, what is this advertisement we're watching on the television? I mean, we talk about some of the critical questions, but I don't want her to feel like, I've actually said to her, if you ever see anything online that you don't know what it is, or it confuses you, or it scares you, I want you to come and talk to me. You will not get in trouble, because that is the thing. You don't want your kid to see something like, there's a lot of freaky stuff out there, and we don't want, you don't want your kid to feel like they can't ask you about it. So I just think it's like anything else. Henry Jenkins often used to say that you don't go to a concert of 5th graders playing the violin because you love to hear it. You're there to support your kid. You're there because you've got their back. And that's how we need to think of it, not lording over them or looking over their shoulder. It's like, I've got your back. I want to help you understand what's out there. It is a complex world, and it is a complex internet, and they are seeing stuff at a younger age than they used to. So we do really have to make sure we're supporting them in meaningful ways.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for being mindful of the media that you were on. So I'd like to turn it over to the audience if you have any questions.
This is where the lunchtime part.
Besides what's relevant. Yes.
I have a comment, pretty loud, but basically I think it's so important to make sure we keep media literacy and digital citizenship connected. And media literacy, as we all know, it came before digital citizenship, and I think it's that we're here in Washington, some of the librarians who are implementing our bill, it said, well, we can't do it in certain parts because there's no computers. I said, no. So, it's educating that there's so many things in media that we can do. So that's my biggest thing, is that we make sure we keep those connections, because they're critical. They're critically aligned together.
Yeah, and if you can think of a cooler name for either media literacy or digital citizenship, they just aren't transparent terms, you know, and they've never caught on, either of them, to the general public. So if you can think of something really clever, we'd be
14
open.
syllables altogether.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
or a nice, concise one. Yeah, explanation of what it is.
Other questions? All right, I'd like to give our panel a huge round of applause.
Just a couple of quick announcements. I know everyone wants to get food. Lunch is directly behind us. There is a room